Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The drama behind the scenes at Red Bull continues with Helmut Marko making it very clear that the departure of very important people behind the scenes at Red Bull over the last couple of months has of course had a negative effect on their team and also the trajectory of their car. He also put some blame really on the Christian Horner situation earlier in the year, certainly not helping matters when it comes to the departure of Newey, Wheatley, potentially among others behind the scenes in the team. Verstappen understandably not happy with this whole situation. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Just quickly, this is Sergio Perez meeting up with Mr. Yavidia here, of course, on the right-hand side of your shot, who is pretty much the head guy over there at Red Bull. Not Red Bull Racing, Red Bull, right, from the Thai side of the operation. We talked about all this drama a few months ago when it came down to Christian Horner, because it seems like Mr. Yavidia here has effectively given Horner his full backing from that perspective. And here's Sergio having a meal with him. So, don't expect Perez to be out of there anytime soon, because Horner, who was widely expected to be fired, had Yavidia's backing, stayed in the team, no questions asked. Maybe the same story here for Sergio Perez. I guess time will tell on that one, but it is one of the topics which is raising questions on the team, because is Max going to be especially happy with the situation, with Perez not exactly being the wingman that he needs him to be. We've talked about Lando, like, look, you need Oscar to help you out. That's what people are saying. I would kind of agree with that if they want to have a title fight. But it's not like Max has Perez to help him out this year like he did back in 2021, for example. This is Ollie Behrman in the SF24 doing a Pirelli tyre test. I think he did like 160 odd laps here around Fiorano yesterday. Speaking of Ferrari, this is a pretty interesting analysis from AMUS here really on their new floor, because they brought the floor to Barcelona, which had more downforce, but it came with the bouncing. And, there was some discussion about the fact that you can put yourself in the zone where the bouncing is triggered, the result of too much downforce generated not in a consistent way. So there's a limit. There's a fundamental aerodynamic limit that the team's going to approach but seemingly never surpass. And it seems like Ferrari went too far with the upgrade they brought earlier in the season. He says they were too aggressive. So they found an interim solution. They used like half of the old floor, half of the new floor, and in that way they made the car a bit better over the last couple of rounds. But based on that data, they developed the new floor that they brought in, of course, for Monza, where they won. They rejigged the front keel, rearranged the Venturi tunnels, and modified the slope angle of the floor to minimize losses towards the diffuser. And they designed a few other things, and basically they were so confident this new floor was going to work well that they just threw it on the cars. No comparison, nothing like that. They just threw it straight on the cars, and they were sure, the engineers said, the numbers did not lie when it came to the performance of this new floor. So, the issue is that Monza is very much so an outlier. The question for Ferrari, therefore, is how much can you read into the success? In quali, they were very close. Charles Leclerc, to be fair, still wasn't massively happy with the balance in quali, but he was basically only a 10th off pole in the end, which, of course, was Lando Norris in the McLaren, who wasn't happy with his lap either, and Hamilton also wasn't happy with his lap either. So, there were other drivers that could have won on pole that day. It's usually a pretty big outlier circuit, and of course, Baku and Singapore are similar, right? Not much more informative. So, a lot of things go straight ahead or at right angles around corners. But Ferrari are convinced that their floor worked, and it will work elsewhere. And look, they can't say with certainty that it's going to work everywhere, but they can say with a high degree of confidence that they believe this floor had no negative side effects and will still be highly effective at the upcoming rounds as well. When it comes down to the competitiveness of the championship, given what we've seen over the last couple of rounds, another big update here at Ferrari today was Loic Serra, former Mercedes man, former, very close, of course, with Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes days. He will be, as was rumoured a little while ago, the new technical director for Ferrari. This has now been confirmed. He's joining the team on the 1st of October. Rumour had it a few weeks ago now, maybe a month or so ago, that he's already working with the team kind of behind the scenes because gardening leave exists, but there are maybe some ways around it. You can send a message here or send a message there, and in certain ways you can maybe get away with it. And well, he seems to be, he confirmed today, joining as the technical director from certainly the chassis side of the equation. So this, I think, will definitely please Hamilton to some end. Of course, a driver who worked very closely with Hamilton on the Mercedes days. The rumour had it as well that when they were going into 2023, designing the W14, Sarah and Hamilton were very much aligned on the fact that the concept they were sticking with in some ways going into the W14 was not going to work. And of course, well, if that's true, they were both right on that one. They had to change tack on the W14. Now the W15, at least now, is a far stronger car with respect to last year's car, although the championship is actually looking kind of different because last year McLaren and certainly Ferrari were rather nowhere. But yeah, Sarah to Ferrari. Obviously, it's Enrico Cardile who was previously there. He's joining Aston Martin, and Aston Martin are looking to form their own powerhouse in some respects because we're pretty damn sure Adrian Newey is coming into that team as well. Rumour has it that's going to be confirmed next week, at the start of next week sometime. I guess we'll see. The rumour has it before Baku. We're expecting that confirmation to arrive if it ever does. Let's talk upgrades though, because it's interesting to see what Mercedes will bring to the upcoming rounds. They have their new floor, but they're not fully convinced their floor is actually working as intended. It's funny how it works, because at the very start of the regulations, 2022, some floors, some suspension setups were great, e.g. Red Bull that Newey designed, some weren't so great, e.g. Mercedes, with Hamilton and Russell destroying their spines up and down the Baku straight. What's interesting is how things have kind of gone full circle. The teams realise, okay, we need to promote stability and compliance over peak downforce, but now we're a couple of years into the cycle, the teams need to chase peak downforce, right? And we're seeing this now, that teams are bringing these new floors, and they're bringing more downforce, but they're triggering some of these old problems again because they're just slightly over the line on what they can get away with. Ferrari have done that and now corrected it, it seems. Mercedes are not sure if they've done that or not. I mean, they've definitely added downforce with this floor, but the floor they used to win in Spa and to win in Silverstone was the old floor, and they were very good on both of those weekends. The new floor they think is quicker, but they're not really sure because it might be faster if, like, a robot was driving, but in the hands of an actual human, when there's, like, balance to be considered and, other factors like that, consistency of the car through corners, that's when Mercedes aren't fully convinced yet their new floor is actually a good idea. So they say that it's difficult to judge the potential side effect of this upgrade they've brought to their car. And McLaren are in a very interesting position because they have a new floor as well. They have a brand new floor ready to bring to the car, but they don't want to do it. They're holding it back. They're kind of basically holding off until they think they might need it. And it's an interesting situation that McLaren find themselves in. They can probably bring other bits and pieces to the car. I think they probably will, but they've got a new floor on the way, but they don't want to fall into the Ferrari and the Mercedes trap, as it were, bring in a new floor that has more downforce. Maybe the slower corners are better, but it affects their balance, especially in the medium and the high-speed corners potentially. It takes the engineers a bit of time to understand how to optimize it, how to set it up, whether it's even better than the previous one. It takes the drivers a bit of time to adjust to. It's like when you're making a championship charge, as they are, and you've had the fastest car now for quite a few weekends in a row, unless the other teams are really bringing some big steps to catch you up, it might be sensible for McLaren just to kind of leave their car as it is. And that seems to be what they're planning to do at the moment. But look, let's say a Ferrari, they actually end up being very competitive at upcoming tracks, and all of a sudden Lando's getting, second or third behind a Ferrari or even a couple of Ferraris, then they'll probably have to think, okay, if we want to win this, because at that point the constructors is still under threat, not from Red Bull, but from Ferrari. Ferrari are only like 40 odd points behind in the constructors. Like, they're still there in the fight if they become very good. I'm not sure they will, but if they were to, then McLaren might have to say, okay, we do need to bring this new floor because it's our only hope of trying to win this championship or both championships at that point. But for now, Lando's eaten into Max's leads by, I think, 5.5 points over the last, 10 races or 8 races, something like that, every round on average, which is far fewer than he should have done. But if he keeps that up, he'll finish the championship 18 points behind, which is pretty close. So he needs to do more than 5.5. He needs to do 8, obviously, from now to the end of the year. But he's been doing that recently. So even with poor execution, you could argue from both sides. And if Mercedes and Ferrari are going to make some progress, but maybe they're not, and if Red Bull don't make any progress, McLaren can probably rest as they are. I think it is a general theory, though, that if McLaren do want to win both championships, they probably do need to put their weight behind Lando. Sure, mathematically, Piastri's not out of it, but realistically, he is out of it. He's not going to finish above Lando this year in the championship. There's just no way, and he's not close enough to Max to challenge if you actually use your brain. If you look at the data and look at the numbers, you might say, well, technically he's in the fight, but it's a debate, isn't it? And Zach Brown says, Piastri's helped Lando a lot over the course of the year. I'm struggling to remember precisely when. I mean, look, obviously there's been some teamwork in play, but it's not like there's a key moment that comes to mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that was an important race where Piastri really helped Lando get the win there. The only time that happened was in Hungary, the other way around, was it not? So, I don't know, that sounds to me that Zach Brown is definitely of the boat of we're not making team orders happen, although Andrea Stella, the actual team principal, not the CEO, which is Mr. Brown here, Stella said that, well, we have had that conversation, we will have that conversation, and we may come to the conclusion we need to back Lando. So there's a bit of a debate really on what's happening here. Speaking quickly of Lando and kind of segueing, I suppose, into the Red Bull discussion, Helmut Marko actually revealed on the Inside Line podcast that Lando was a target. We kind of know this, but he actually just straight up confirms that we had a contract ready for Lando for Toro Rosso, of course, a few years ago when it was still Toro Rosso, and there was some contractual situation, as there always is with McLaren, to be honest, and they couldn't make it happen. But look, Lando's shown loyalty to McLaren over the last few years. You might expect him to get that paid back on some level by the team, but maybe not. This was interesting from Joe Soward as well, discussing Kimi Antonelli. Of course, very promising driver, in my opinion, and in many other people's opinions, certainly in Mercedes' opinion. He crashed a car in Monza, but his laps before that were very impressive, and his laps in the last several seasons he's raced have been very impressive as well. Rumour has it that Marko, pretty impressed by Antonelli and would love to have him at Red Bull, which is kind of, look, it ain't going to happen. Mercedes have this guy under lock and key, and if he is to go any other team in his career, Ferrari is the team, you'd think, wouldn't you? Because Italian driver, it's just, I'd love to see a world where in 5-10 years time, whatever, Antonelli is in a Ferrari and has actually achieved the things that people think that he might achieve, and Marko's trying to get him to Red Bull. That seems unlikely, but it would certainly help ease the current nail-biting situation where they're also struggling with their driver situation. Ricciardo can't be happy about what's happening. Perez can't be happy about the fact that he signed a new deal, but potentially he's going to get dropped from the team anyway. Max ain't happy because the car is nowhere near as good as it used to be. So there's all sorts of problems these guys have to deal with, right? And Marko makes it pretty clear. Look, he says Newey leaving has not had, basically that's not resulted in the team regressing, at least the car regressing. And as I said yesterday, maybe that's true, but also it's not like they can ask him what to do about it because he's no longer with the team. Although Marko somewhat contradicts that statement when you look at what he said here, because he talked about the fact that the problem is the departure of important people. And he was also asked the question on the Horner situation, the Horner case earlier in the year, which in many ways kick-started this whole process, right? I mean, fundamentally, Horner's still there, but clearly behind the scenes, things have not been anywhere near all sunshine and rainbows. We believe the Newey departure was linked to the Horner case, at least in some part. Like, maybe Newey, maybe Wheatley, Jonathan Wheatley, their kind of trackside director, is now gone as well. He was also considering a move, but it's like that Horner case was argued to be the final push for many of those guys to kind of say, all right, now actually is the time to leave. And as Marko says, that Horner situation, the scandal or whatever, that certainly doesn't help. So if it doesn't help, then arguably, Marko thinks that it contributed in some degree, but that's nothing to do with our technical problems. The problem is the departure of important people. It's been the case with engineers as well. Dan Fallows has gone to Aston Martin. Rob Marshall has gone to McLaren. Now Newey's gone. Sure, Wheatley's more like the trackside man rather than designing the car, but still was absolutely on it every single weekend. And as Marko says, if some employees want to leave and they get a good offer, they see a new opportunity, they take it, hinting that Aston Martin's offer was irresistible, seemingly to Adrian Newey. So, it's a fascinating set of circumstances. I think my point is that it makes it ever more impressive in some respects, the fact that Mercedes were able to maintain their dominance for many a year. 8 constructors' titles in a row is massively impressive, and I think maybe even more so in hindsight, right? I mean, in this era, Max has an like the last year's Red Bull was so good it's barely believable, and some people obviously don't believe it. But look, Max was in that car dominating the championships, and last season it looked like, okay, when is this Red Bull domination ever going to end? It didn't seem likely until at least 2026, and even then, who knows? They'd still had Newey. They don't have Newey anymore, and the Mercedes dominance is impressive in hindsight, I think, even more so, because yes, there was some churn of employees, but Mercedes were generally able to keep on. There's always some brain drain from the winning team, but they were generally able to keep on their best people and manage their kind of ecosystem and their structure in a way that they were still going to be able to produce very competitive cars. And the fact that, like, at the end of their domination, that's when they came up with, like, their best ever car, the W11. I think that's impressive organization management in hindsight. And clearly, you're not seeing that from Red Bull, are you? Because a couple of years into them winning everything, it's complete chaos, and it is going to cost them this year's Constructors' Championship. It may not cost them the drivers, but it may cost them next year's drivers, because as things currently stand, Max is, thinking it's impossible to win the championship with an undriveable car. I think Andrea Stella responded to this and said, well, come on, Max, like, you are leading the championship by rather a lot here. But obviously Max isn't happy with the situation, and if this continues, then he will even more so consider his options. The good news is for Max that in the European leg that we've now just concluded, he still nearly scored the most points of anybody, right? 142. Piastri scored the most at 146. Lando at 140, Hamilton at 124, then the two Ferrari boys and Perez, kind of the worst of the top 8, as it were. But look, that's the fact that over the European leg he's extended his championship lead on Lando is not a great look for Lando, but of course it's potentially still on. Intrigued to your thoughts as well on this as we close out the video. Really, I'll go to this one first actually. So this is not what the team says. This is what the Autosport viewers voted on in terms of #1 driver in the team. So from an outside perspective, the team might never say anything like this. They certainly wouldn't at Aston Martin, for example, but this is the general feeling. Equal is the black box, and the white box is the other one. So some of these are pretty straightforward and obvious, right? I think the Ocon situation in Alpine is pretty fascinating. If Ocon hadn't been confirmed to be getting fired, this might have been very different, but clearly Gasly has won the war there internally. It's interesting at RB as well, with Ricciardo and Tsunoda, most people saying that Yuki is the #1 driver, which, in terms of overall performance over the last season is true, but I don't know if RB necessarily see it that way. I'd probably say that they're more so equal, really, and even their performances are pretty damn equal, to be fair. And Danny Rick, of course, has some serious star power. If you look at the top 4 teams, you'll find something like this, and well, if you look at Ferrari, it's quite clear that Leclerc is considered the #1 over there, although many people would say, and understandably, that, Sainz is there or thereabouts. The Mercedes situation you might well expect to be the case as well. Russell, of course, on some level has been the faster driver, but Hamilton, of course, is still Hamilton. And on a Sunday, there's still no doubt about, who's the stronger driver. Let's not talk about the Red Bull situation, but, the McLaren stuff, right? I mean, 49% will say Lando's the #1, 14% will say that Oscar's the #1, but 37%, the most of anyone in any of these teams, will say that it's equal, which is probably how it seems from the outside. Should it be? That, of course, is another debate entirely, but very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.